When the Johnson family disappeared from their Ravenwood Heights home in 1998, the story became a dark legend whispered in hushed tones. Part 1 revealed the names of those believed to be behind the disappearance. Marcus's resentful former colleague, Robert Hale, and his neighbor-turned-accomplice, Henry Whitaker, a man poisoned by prejudice and grief. But the case was far from closed. In 2022, a shocking discovery unearthed new evidence that pulled the Johnsons back into the headlines and left the community facing the truth it had buried for decades. The lead came unexpectedly. A group of construction workers renovating an abandoned property on the edge of Ravenwood Heights stumbled upon something strange: a locked storm cellar beneath the crumbling Whitaker barn. For years, the barn had been left to rot, overgrown with ivy and avoided by local kids who claimed it was haunted. Few knew it still belonged to Henry Whitaker. When police were called, what they found inside the cellar stunned even the most seasoned investigators. The cellar was small, damp, and suffocating, but it contained boxes stacked neatly against the wall, each one carefully sealed, as though protecting their contents. Inside were chilling personal belongings of the Johnson family: Danielle's missing violin bow, Caleb's astronomy book, with his handwriting still visible in the margins, Amaya's stuffed rabbit, Clover, dirt-stained but unmistakable, Angela's church hat, bent out of shape, with faint traces of blood on the lining, and tucked in a file folder were photographs, old Polaroids, grainy, but unmistakably of the Johnsons. Some were candid shots, taken from a distance. The kids playing in the yard, Marcus walking to his car, Angela unloading groceries. They weren't just taken before the family vanished. Some were dated weeks leading up to that night. The implication was horrifying. Robert and Henry had been watching the Johnsons, stalking them, planning. News of the discovery sent shockwaves through Ravenwood Heights. Angela's sister Cynthia broke down on live television. "They treated my family like prey, like animals to be hunted. My sister, my nieces, my nephews. They lived in fear, and we never knew it. They never had a chance." The images reignited the community's guilt. For years, Ravenwood Heights had whispered rumors about the Johnsons, treating them like outsiders. Now the truth was undeniable. Their silence had allowed hatred to fester until it swallowed an entire family. As investigators pieced together the evidence, they realized the barn had been searched before, back in 1999 during the initial investigation. Yet somehow the cellar had been overlooked. How? A retired officer revealed in a confidential interview that Henry Whitaker's property was briefly checked, but the search warrant at the time was limited, conveniently restricting access to outbuildings like the barn. Which begged the question: who protected Henry Whitaker back then? The chilling possibility emerged. Someone in Ravenwood Heights law enforcement may have shielded him. Armed with the new evidence, police moved to re-interview both Robert and Henry. Robert, still living in Ohio under an alias, denied everything. But investigators noted his demeanor shifted when shown photos of the barn. He demanded a lawyer and ended the interview. Henry, now an old man confined to a wheelchair, smirked when officers confronted him about the items. His response chilled them. "You think that's the worst of what you'll find? You don't know this town at all." The revelations tore open old wounds in Ravenwood Heights. For the first time, residents openly admitted their complicity. Some confessed to overhearing racist remarks from Henry years ago but brushing them off. Others admitted they suspected Robert of harboring grudges against Marcus but never spoke up. The Johnsons' old house on Willow Lane became a memorial overnight. Flowers, photographs, and candles covered the steps. Strangers traveled from neighboring towns to leave tributes, finally acknowledging the pain the Johnsons had endured. One sign left at the doorstep read, "You were our neighbors. You belonged here. We're sorry we failed you." As investigators cataloged the evidence from the barn, they discovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside was a single rusted metal box. The contents stunned them. Inside were keys not just to the Johnson home, but to several other houses in Ravenwood Heights. Alongside the keys were journals filled with Henry Whitaker's handwriting. The journals weren't only about the Johnsons. They contained notes, maps, and strange symbols connected to other families who had briefly lived in Ravenwood Heights and mysteriously left without explanation. Had Henry, and possibly Robert, targeted more than just the Johnsons? Were they part of a bigger pattern that stretched beyond one family's tragedy? For Angela's sister Cynthia, the discovery was bittersweet. It brought her closer to the truth, but still offered no closure. "I want their bodies. I want to bring them home. I want to bury them with dignity. Until then, this wound stays open." And for Ravenwood Heights, the haunting truth became impossible to ignore. The Johnsons weren't victims of random violence. They were targeted, stalked, and erased by men driven by envy and hatred, and maybe, just maybe, aided by others who looked the other way. But the final twist has yet to be revealed. Because investigators now believe the barn isn't the only place holding Ravenwood Heights' darkest secrets. The storm cellar opened a door into the past, but it also raised terrifying new questions. Who protected Henry Whitaker back in 1999? Were the Johnsons the only family to suffer at his hands? And will the truth about where they are finally be uncovered before it's too late? For nearly 25 years, the Johnson family's disappearance was a wound that never healed. Their names became whispers in Ravenwood Heights, their story a grim reminder of how hatred and silence could destroy lives. Earlier on, we uncovered the chilling discovery inside Henry Whitaker's barn. The belongings of the Johnson family, photographs proving they were stalked, and journals suggesting a pattern of obsession. But what everyone still wanted more than anything was closure. And in 2023, the world finally learned the fate of Marcus, Angela, Danielle, Caleb, and Maya Johnson. It began with a tip from David Price, the same man who first broke his silence about the van. He remembered Henry once mentioning an old hunting spot deep in the woods outside Ravenwood Heights. Investigators searched the area with cadaver dogs. There, beneath a thicket of pines, they found a shallow grave. 5 sets of remains, carefully arranged, wrapped in plastic sheeting. Dental records confirmed the unthinkable. It was the Johnson family. Beside them lay one final, haunting artifact, Danielle's violin, cracked but intact, buried alongside her family as though to silence her music forever. The discovery sent shockwaves across the nation. What had once been a mystery became a tragedy with undeniable proof. The Johnsons had been murdered. With the remains recovered, prosecutors moved swiftly to charge Robert Hale and Henry Whitaker with kidnapping and murder. But both men fought back viciously. Robert, connected to wealthy relatives with political ties, hired a high-powered legal team. Henry's long-standing reputation in Ravenwood Heights earned him quiet but powerful allies who pressured the courts to let an old man live out his days in peace. For a time, it seemed justice might slip away, that once again the Johnsons would be betrayed, not only by neighbors but by the very system meant to protect them. At the trial, Angela's sister Cynthia took the stand. Holding Maya's stuffed rabbit in her hands, she addressed the courtroom. "For 25 years, my family lay in the dirt while their killers lived free. For 25 years, we carried their absence while this town carried its silence. This is not about an old man. This is not about a bitter colleague. This is about 5 human beings who had the right to live. And I will not rest until their names are honored with justice." Her words silenced the courtroom. The defense argued lack of physical evidence tying Robert and Henry to the actual burial. But then, the prosecution revealed one final piece of evidence recovered from Henry's journals. A map, hand-drawn, with an X marking the burial site. The very place the Johnsons had been found. It was the smoking gun. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned their verdict. Robert Hale was sentenced to life without parole. Henry Whitaker, frail and wheelchair-bound, received the same. The courtroom erupted in emotion. Tears, relief, and a long-overdue sense of accountability. For the Johnson family, justice had finally prevailed. Ravenwood Heights was never the same. The Johnson home was restored and turned into a memorial center for victims of hate crimes. Each year, on October 14th, candles are lit on Willow Lane in memory of Marcus, Angela, Danielle, Caleb, and Maya. The story of their disappearance became more than a local tragedy. It became a national reminder. that silence in the face of injustice is complicity, and that hatred left unchecked will always claim innocent lives. At the closing ceremony of the memorial's opening, a young violinist from the local school played a haunting melody in honor of Danielle. Her cracked violin, recovered from the grave, was displayed in a glass case nearby. For the first time in decades, Ravenwood Heights heard music where once there had been silence. The Johnson story is one of pain, injustice, and loss, but also of truth, resilience, and, ultimately, justice. Their voices were stolen, but their legacy now speaks louder than ever. Thank you for following this series to its conclusion. If this story moved you, I invite you to stay connected to this channel. Your presence here ensures that stories like the Johnsons are never forgotten. Subscribe if you'd like to walk with us through more hidden truths, because together, we keep their memory alive.